Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name's Dale Carlson. I'm an architectural historian, a photographer, and a lecturer working out of Berkeley, Michigan. And this is, I want to say like probably the 7th time the Ann Arbor District Library has hired me. So really, really awesome of them. Let's see here. Is my remote going to work? It is going to work. So anyway, again, I am an author specializing in architectural history. I rest most of my expertise on the books that I have written, but I also am engaged in an art history major at Wayne State University right now. I have 2 weeks to go in like 4 papers left to write. I'm so excited about that. My parents are both alive, and they get to see me graduate college, too. 'Cause I went for 7 years in the 90s, never got a degree. So anyway, that's where I'm at right now. Before I get going too far in the lecture today, I want to thank the Ann Arbor District Library for hiring me regularly. Pete Pasquet there in the back, who sets up a lot of the logistics, our technical team, who is live streaming me today, and also the Michigan Stained Glass Census. If you folks find yourself wanting to learn more about stained glass in our state after my lecture today, they are a really, really great resource that I reference all the time. So I think I'm going to switch hands here, because this needs to be closer to my computer, it looks like. It does. All right. I'm going to break down my lecture to you today into 7 parts. I'm going to give you a short bio of myself and how I attained my expertise in the fields of architectural history. We're going to look at different ways we can analyze stained glass. There's a lot of different ways you can approach the study of the history. We're going to talk just a little bit about Louis Comfort Tiffany and his dad, and how his company is differentiated from his father's jewelry store that we know from the famous Audrey Hepburn movie. We're going to look at different research resources that apply specifically to Tiffany windows. Then we're going to look at Tiffany window hotspots in the state of Michigan. There's quite a few. I've photographed almost all of them. I think I've only got like 3 or 4 left, and then I'll have the whole state. One's in Marquette, though, so that's going to take a second. Along the way, we're going to cover just 3 of Tiffany's contemporaries, because even though I really love Tiffany, one of the things I don't like about him is that he kind of overshadows a lot of his contemporaries that are just a micron below him in terms of, artistry and the qualities of their career. We're also going to take a quick look at this architect, Gordon Lloyd, because Gordon Lloyd has more Tiffany windows in his standing buildings in the state of Michigan than any other architect. So we're going to talk about him for just a second as well. We'll finish it all off with a Q&A. All right, so if you like what you hear today, I'd love to encourage you to sign up for my, I went too far ahead, my email updates. There's a little pad of paper right there with a pen. I send out regular email blasts about architectural history in the city of Detroit, in the metro area, and the state at large. And on top of that, I keep my subscribers informed of when my next lectures are coming up. So I'd love it if you could sign up if you really enjoy the lecture today. All right, let's start off with my bio. My interest in the state of Michigan and the city of Detroit's architectural history begins in the early 90s, when I leave my boyhood home of Traverse City to attend school at Michigan State University in East Lansing. And back then, I had a lot more hair. Thank you. That's the best joke you're going to hear today, you guys. So laugh it up. Back then, I really, really loved driving to the city of Detroit pretty much every weekend to take in what was a really exciting and groundbreaking Detroit techno and house music scene. And as a bright-eyed youth, seeing the big city regularly for the first time in my life, I was really struck by the scale and proportion of the buildings I was seeing as compared to my modest boyhood home of Traverse City. Architectural history, it kind of became a hobby of mine for about 20 years. I started taking it a lot more seriously in the early 2010s when I met this fella, Einar E. Kavarin, through online correspondence. Einar lives in suburban Phoenix. He's also an architectural historian, and he lived in Metro Detroit in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. In fact, he went to Eastern Michigan and almost got a master's in historic preservation, but I guess he fell one step short. Well, anyway, Einar and I, we met through architectural forums online that were focused on Detroit architectural history. We started writing comments back and forth to each other. We found out we had a lot in common. Started writing emails back and forth to each other. After a few months of emailing each other, Einar revealed to me that in the 1990s, he hunted down, come on, oh, is my battery dying? There it is right there. He hunted down the son of a really well-known architectural sculptor by the name of Corrado Parducci, who worked in the Detroit area from 1924 to 1981. And Corrado's son, Alan, allowed Einar to photocopy his father's original studio ledgers, enumerating over 600 commissions he executed during that time, as well as a scrapbook containing over 700 images of the sculpture he created over the course of his career, and a lot of really personal tidbits too, like this here, his birth certificate from the small town in Italy he was born in 1900. So once I found out about the ledgers and the scrapbooks, and that Einar was willing to share these with me, the gears of my mind began turning, and I decided, I want to write a book about Parducci. It's a really well-known figure in the annals of Detroit architectural history. There's a bunch of Parduccis right around here. Nobody had yet written a book about him, and I felt a responsibility to do something epic with the research materials that fell in my lap. Took me quite a while. Got the idea around 2012. Didn't get the book out till January 2020. There was quite a few bumps in the road along the way. Biggest bump, though, this is the first book I'd ever written. I had to learn how to be a good architectural historian. And this book is what taught me how to do that, how to find the right local archives, ask the right questions, find the right local experts to really be able to back up what I present as factual in the book. Put out a second edition just a few months later. Third edition, that should say 2027 on it because there isn't a third edition out yet. But eventually there probably will be one because I've discovered about 30 more Parduccis since I put the book out. So with Parducci, there's always something new to discover because, as I said before, over 600 commissions enumerated. I've only found about 330 of them. So there's more out there. All right, so now you know a little bit about my expertise. I should also mention that the experience of writing the book was so fulfilling that I followed it up in the next couple years with 2 more books. One about Albert Kahn's extant structures in the Metro Detroit area, and one about stained glass in the metro area of New Orleans. So those both got released in 2022. They're on the counter there if you care to check it out. And I just got new printings made of my Parducci and Kahn books if anybody's interested in making a purchase. So let me tell you how I started getting going on the stained glass shooting. So it actually started when I was at photo school at Oakland Community College, 2018, 2019. But also, when I finished my Parducci book in early 2020, I immediately went down to New Orleans to get ready for a 3-month stay there. Ended up being 5 months, and I'm going to tell you why. While I was down there, I was like, I want to write a book about something history related in New Orleans. I hadn't decided on what yet. Well, one of the first things I did when I got down there in January 2020 is call my good friend Matt Grau Jr., who's the head of alumni relations at Jesuit High School in New Orleans. And I said, Matt, here's a free copy of my Parducci book. Thank you for getting me inside the building to photograph the Parducci there, and there's some on the outside too. You know what, Matt? I've really been getting into photographing stained glass lately too. He's like, oh, really? Well, you got to come back to the high school then, because guess what? We have a transplanted chapel from our original high school in downtown New Orleans, a building that got dismantled to make room for a skyscraper. All of its decor from the turn of the century got moved into our chapel when our new building got built in the 1920s. It's all Franz Mayer material. He invited me in to photograph it all. It was while I was photographing this room that I decided I'm going to write a book about stained glass in New Orleans. And this is just an awesome, awesome example to start out with. So that's how I really got my head super into photographing stained glass. I ended up staying there for 5 months doing almost all of the photography and research for that book. And when I got back to Detroit, naturally, I've been working on a similar book about Detroit ever since. Much bigger metropolis, though, so it's going to take, a couple more years. I'm about 4 or 5 years into it. But just a couple more years and I'll be putting that book out too. Really looking forward to it. All right, so there is my stained glass book. I have that one available too, but not many people from Detroit buy it every once in a while. But I do have it available if anybody's interested. So when we set out to study stained glass, there's a bunch of different ways that we can approach it. We can start with narrative and symbolic content that's analyzing the story that is told by the glass, and that obviously only works with glass that has narrative content. Some is just patterns and, just analyzing a non-narrative art can be interesting too, but it doesn't give you as much to latch onto as when you see a story about Christ or a saint portrayed by the window. We can also look at design and fabrication processes. This is a little bit more technical, and this teaches you how glass is made, what are the different things that they use to frame the window up, what are the different styles of executing those kind of windows. So that's interesting also. We can go with bios of the memorialized. A lot of times when you see an old stained glass window, you'll see somebody's name on it. Usually it's the name of somebody who's rather affluent. The family goes to the church. They're the ones that paid for the window. They're probably going to be in local newspapers because they've got scratch, and that way we can look at their life stories. We can also look at the bios of the makers of the windows and their corporate history. Sometimes it's an individual, but usually if it's in a church, chances are it came from a larger corporation that's going to have more than one artist on staff. Finally, we can do inventory site histories, and that's where we just go around and we find out, what buildings have the windows in them and what are the histories of those buildings. So of these 5 modes of study, and there's a few more out there too, but these are the major ones. My favorites are Mako bios, corporate histories, and inventory site histories. And of those 2, inventory site histories are my favorite. And that's what I like to do with my lectures, is I like to take people on a tour of places they haven't been to either A, encourage them to go see it for themselves, or B, maybe they're not able to, and this is the only way they're going to see it. So you're going to see my own photography of all of these sites, and it's something I've really, really worked on developing over the last few years, and I feel like I'm one of the best shooters of stained glass in the metro area. I hope you guys will agree with me by the time we get done with it. All right, so let's make a distinction before we move forward between Louis Comfort Tiffany, who runs the stained glass and the lamp company, and his dad, Charles Louis Tiffany, who founds the jewelry store in Manhattan that Audrey Hepburn goes to at breakfast at Tiffany's. So they are, there's a little bit of corporate overlap, but for the most part, these are completely distinct companies. Louis, he does execute some jewelry for his dad's shop. He does do some interior design work that is through his dad's company, but for the most part, the window company and the lamp company, completely separate from his father. His father bails him out a couple times, though, financially, because Tiffany's a guy who's constantly going for total artistic perfection, and sometimes that involves spending more money than he possibly should have. So moving on. Come on, remote. Tiffany Studios research resources. There's a lot of different things we can look at when we want to learn about Tiffany windows. I brought quite a few with me today if anybody wants to examine some of the resources I brought with me. If you go looking online for books about Tiffany windows, this one's in the public domain, published in 1910. There's a bunch of different places hosting this book online that you can go and find yourself. And it's a pretty thorough enumeration of Tiffany windows in the United States up to 1910. Doesn't get them all, though. None of the books that purport to get them all do. There's always a few stragglers out there that somehow elude their attention. We can also look at newspaper and periodical accounts. This is my favorite way to discover history, especially when it comes to architectural history. But stained glass windows, typically not a regular subject of discussion in architectural pages of newspapers. But there is an exception. If your window's by Tiffany, it's a good chance it's going to get mentioned in the local press, which is sad because guys like John Lafarge, guys like Willett, they should be getting as much recognition as well, and Tiffany overshadows almost all of their legacies, unfortunately. Also, a lot of churches and places that have Tiffany windows, they write their own histories. There's a wide spectrum in these histories from not very good to excellent. So you have to be a good historian that is able to vet the quality of written histories. Which one are you looking at here? St. Cecilia in Grand Rapids? Oh, okay, great. We're going to cover that in just a second. Susan B. Anthony spoke there in 1899. Yeah, so really great history in that building. We'll get to it in just a minute. And then finally, this is a book I brought with me today, Alistair Duncan's Tiffany Windows, 1980. Obviously, that's 70 years after 1910, so we're going to get a lot of additions to that list that we saw in 1910. But Alistair, he doesn't get all of them, as much as I'm sure he would have loved to. In fact, we just looked in the book, and we did not find an entry for St. Andrews in Detroit, but we have two really expert architectural historians with us today that say they're in there, and I tend to believe them. St. Andrew, did I say Detroit? I meant St. Andrews here in Ann Arbor, right at the corner of Kingsley and Division. Yes, and it's a Gordon Lloyd designed church too, so that adds to the evidentiary pile that backs up your claim. You can be sure I'm going to be looking into it. So in the Tiffany book by Duncan, we get a lot of great examples. And Tiffany's really his very, very best works. They're kind of concentrated on the East Coast, Boston, Philly, New York, Connecticut, places like that. But that doesn't mean we don't get a bunch of great examples here in the Midwest. I picked out a few here that are a little bit closer to us, one in upstate New York, one in Pittsburgh, and one at the University of Chicago. We have some that I think compete with these that you're going to find out here about in just a second. But really super amazingly elaborate stuff and quality color photography in the book too. I made these shots by photographing the actual book. So just gives you an idea of the quality that's inside. We also learn a lot about the Tiffany Studios inner workings in the book. We get some shots of the design room, which is fantastic. We get a shot of, come on, baby. We get a little a few pages that tell us about the process of making a stained glass window and how it starts from a cartoon. That's actually a word that gets used in the industry for a drawing. The cartoon, it kind of gets stuck to an easel where they slowly start filling in the pieces of glass behind the cartoon until they have a completed window. It's a pretty complex process. We're not going to get too deep into it, but if you want to learn more, Duncan's book will teach you some rudimentary stuff. If you really want to learn to make stained glass, you're going to have to dig it a little bit deeper. Come on. I don't know what's going on here. I think I might there we go. Here is the shade shop, and the lamps are an offshoot of the stained glass. Tiffany wants a way to preserve a lot of these little small pieces that they're losing every time they manufacture a window. So that's where the lamps come from, and the lamps end up rivaling the windows in terms of their overall fame in our present day and age. Let's see here. One more shot. It says the glass shop at Tiffany, but this is not the room where they make glass, because that's a really super hot furnace-y room, and that's much more like being in a, the place where they process metals. What's going on? With a better battery? Oh, maybe, yeah. See if we can get it to work. Let's see what happens. I'm not too worried about it. Okay. I get and this is working again, of course. I get technical difficulties like this while lecturing all the time. So what really sets Tiffany apart from his competitors, from his peers, and the reason why he overshadows most of them is the science of glass making, and that's where he really makes the biggest advances. He tries to develop a lot of different styles of glass that are intended to mimic the look of nature, like leaves and foliage and rivers and water and rock. And because Tiffany, he doesn't like windows to be painted on. He will accept it in the hands, the hair, the face, the feet, but he won't accept it hardly anywhere else in the glass. Actually, those parts that do get painted end up being some of my favorite because he's so against it that a lot of times he just brings in the most skilled artist to execute that painted part of the glass. But he doesn't like to have to do it. So he's trying to come up with ways, to make what clouds look like, what rocks look like, cascading water looks like, and he comes up with all these different styles. Probably the most famous of them, though, is opalescent. When we talk about opalescent in its technical sense, we're just talking about the pastel, palette of colors that's produced when you look at an opal. But when we talk about it in the stained glass sense, we mean any pane that has a bunch of different colors in it that swirl together smoothly. And that is really what sets Tiffany's windows apart from the rest. He gets tons and tons of imitators in the years past, but he's the pioneer that does that in his glass development lab. Come on, remote work for me. There we go. So if we're going to look at Tiffany windows in Michigan, where do we start? Toledo, Ohio. Why do we start in Toledo? Well, there's a lot of good reasons, but Toledo almost ended up being in Michigan. And if you guys spend a lot of time in Toledo, sometimes you get the sense that Toledans prefer Michigan to Ohio, and that they feel like they've been ignored. Toledo used to have a ton of money. It's where Libby Glass was based. Libby was pretty much the Ford of his area in terms of philanthropy. A ton of their collection at their museum is paid for by Libby. So naturally, we're going to have some amazing glass in this town, and this is one of the best collections in the Midwest at First Congregational Church. If you guys ever get down there, give them a call in the couple days prior. They're really friendly people. They'll let you come in and look at their glass, and their collection's amazing. Let's look at the outside first, because I love architectural sculpture, and it immediately gives you a clue that this is going to be really, really fancy inside. And also, let's look at the years that it's built, 1914 to 1916, after the 1910 book is put out. That's key. Also, the architects, just so you know, a couple of them cut their teeth in the offices of Smith, Hinchman, and Grills in Detroit, so there is a Detroit connection here as well. So here are 8 beautiful Tiffany windows over their high altar, and we are definitely 100% sure these are all Tiffany's. And why is that? Because in our book published in 1910, they actually list 10 Tiffany windows at this church. I'm not sure what happened to 2 of them. But because this book's published in 1910, we know all these windows have been transplanted from their previous church. So let's get just a few more close-ups and just a little bit of news about the church opening in 1916 there. There you go, these kind of, oops, a little too far there. These kind of, let's go. Okay, and battery died again. This kind of braid work here that we see, and at the top here, very, very representative of Tiffany style this time. But Tiffany has a spectrum that goes all the way from fully ornamental, that means no narrative elements, to fully narrative. So it's always interesting to see and think about why do we have a purely ornamental window in this one environment and a narrative window in another. And sometimes you don't always get the answers, but it's fun to think about. That's Moses on the right there. No, he doesn't have horns. That's a light emanating from his forehead, which symbolizes Moses' acquisition of knowledge. You see that in a lot of old renderings of Moses, especially in stained glass. I love these ornamental windows the most, though. I mean, they're fascinating. And if you're in the church and you go right up next to them like this and you look at them sideways, you can see a lot of these chunks. They jut out like by 1/4 to 1/2 inch in some cases. You can really just get an immediate sense of how unbelievably jeweled and heavy they are, which means that the came, that's the lining between the panes of glass, it has to be constructed perfectly or it's not going to last. And these guys have been here for over a century at this point. Let's get a close-up there. Ugh, it's beautiful, isn't it? There's another ornamental that I didn't get a close-up of, and I kind of regret it. But, you know, anytime I get down to Toledo, I'm sure that they'll invite me in again, should I ask. So not only do we have the Tiffany's that are transplanted from the previous church here, we've got a bunch more. This church has, in fact, there's a legend that Tiffany, on a trip further out to Chicago on a train one time, brought some potential customers to this church to show off the work that was installed here. This would, hard to say if it would be the old church or the new church. But anyway, let's look at some of the stuff that got installed later in the 1920s. We've got 3 radius windows here with truth, justice, the ascension, hope, and inspiration. One of them is by far my favorite, and I think you'll appreciate the reason why. Let's get just a little bit more of a close-up there. Notice how much of the blue is opalescent. Notice how almost all of the glass is opalescent in that it has multiple colors all within a single pane. There's our close-up of, truth, justice, our close-up of the ascension, but this one's my personal favorite. Right there, truth and justice. Why is it my favorite? Because this is at home on the cover of a heavy metal album as it is inside a church. And I love that kind of dual usage look there. It's very, it's got really kind of a neoclassical feel, which some people might feel is out of place in a church, but there's kind of a crossover in those kind of syncretic expressions that we see inside churches during this era. On the north wall, lower in pastels, Guardian Angel, Easter Morning, Good Samaritan. These are about 2 by 3 feet, so significantly smaller than the previous windows we've seen. And they've all got Tiffany signatures on them with dates. which is always nice because sometimes you can have a disputed Tiffany case where stylistically it's very, very Tiffany-esque, but there's no signature on it. And generally speaking, that leads to historical debates among people who debate Tiffany windows. Also, we've got a group of 3 radius windows by a company that's not Tiffany, but is clearly trying to imitate Tiffany. So much so that I personally believe Letterly here probably was a former artist at Tiffany that tried to get his own company started. Giesler, he was into ecclesiastical decor for many years before Letterly showed up, doing like sculpture and communion rails and things of that nature. But once Letterly shows up, they start doing stained glass, and they start doing it really well. And you know, it's kind of tough to just jump into an industry and be an expert at it instantly, and that's what leads me to believe Letterly was probably a transplant from Tiffany. That's speculation, though. No guarantee about that. Real nice work on the jeweling there, too, and you can, I feel, definitely see the Tiffany influence, especially when we compare it to the other purely ornamental windows here. All right, let's move into the state of Michigan now, and we're going to go to the city of Grand Rapids, where they have 5 great Tiffany installations. I've seen 4 of them, and I keep calling the 5th one, but it's owned by a private events organization now, which is generally tougher to get the attention of than churchgoers that aren't as invested in the profit motive. All right, we're going to start off with a synagogue on the, this is, I think maybe about a mile east of downtown Temple Emmanuel. They used to have a downtown temple, and that downtown temple had a Tiffany in it that got transplanted to this church. And we call this a keyhole window because it looks like the hole that you put a key in. And this one also has a signature, which is always incontrovertible evidence. And on top of the evidence put forth by signature, they also have a great book of their church's history that tells exactly how this window got into their church. If anybody cares to take a look, it's right here. These people really produced a nice history for their church. And again, there is a huge spectrum when it comes to histories produced by churches.
You do mean temple.
Did I say temple? What? Oh, I'm sorry. I meant temple. Yep, sorry about that. All right, so let's now move on to a church, and we're going to go to a Methodist Episcopal church that is now just a United Methodist church built in 1916. Robinson and Campau were quite prolific architects in the Grand Rapids area, and in fact, a lot of Michigan, Robinson's father was also really important and designed a lot of lumber baron houses. This is really very, very representative. This is what we expect from Tiffany in this era. Very showy-offy angel wings, which we get all the time. Again, hardly any painting except for in the faces and the hands. I don't think we do a couple exposed feet there. But what Tiffany's really the most famous for, as nice as these renderings of human anatomy are, it's his representation of nature that really blows people's minds, and mine too, as a matter of fact. In addition to Tiffany, a large Tiffany over the high altar here, this is high up in the chapel, about at balcony level. We also have some Willett studios, and Willett is going to be the first contemporary of Tiffany that I take just a little bit of a side note on. William Willett and Ann Lee Willett are the founders. They get some really super important commissions, including the Cadet Chapel at West Point, just as one example. And they're nationally respected, highest in their field during their lifetimes, but it's really their son, this guy right here, who expands the company's imprint and makes it a company that's exporting their windows more nationally. The first generation is kind of concentrated on the East Coast, just like Tiffany, but it's, what's his name? Henry Lee Willett, who really makes it into a national powerhouse, and his son, E. Crosby Willett, continues the tradition. Willett is their own company for about 79 years, founded in Pittsburgh, but immediately moves into Philadelphia the next year. They are absorbed by Willett Hauser Architectural Glass in 1997, and then Willett Hauser is absorbed by Associated Crafts in, 1997. So Willett Hauser is now a division of Associated Crafts and still making windows. All right, let's now move on to St. Cecilia Music Hall. We may have heard us chatting about this one earlier. This is a really important building in Grand Rapids. One of the reasons it's very important, it's one of the earliest buildings in the United States whose construction is funded purely through the funds of a women's group. And also they're involved in a lot of women's issues. And in 1899, in fact, Susan B. Anthony comes and speaks here. So that's really super progressive, cool thing there. And on top of that, they have one Tiffany window that shows, what's that now? St. Cecilia, that's right. But St. Cecilia, she couldn't come back for the grave to model for this. That was actual well-known female dancer, I want to say in New York City at the time. What was her name? Evelyn Nesbit. Evelyn Nesbit. Oh, you guys know that name? Oh, okay. So she served. I didn't know that. Okay, I'm gonna look more into her. Well, she served as the model for Wait. She's got a connection to Stanford White? Really? You're kidding me. This story's getting better and better. Who knows who Stanford White is? All right. Wow, this story really just got great. I'm going to be looking into this one. I had no idea about that part of the story. Well, anyway, this is created to memorialize the daughter of one of the members of St. Cecilia's Club, and I guess she died young. And it's designed, according to their history, by a Grand Rapids native by the name of Frederick S. Church. But Tiffany, he's not a big collaborator. If you design something that's going to be made into a Tiffany window, chances are you work for Tiffany Studios. But I never got to that part of the story. I can't tell you for sure that Church worked for Tiffany, but most likely that is the case. Okay, let's move on to our third site in Grand Rapids. This is our fourth, actually. This is the granddaddy of them all, Park Congregational Church. This is a really old church built in 1867, 1868 by an architect from Adrian by the name of Ashabel Burroughs. But the church is so old that it's got additions almost all around their original building. And not everything about those additions is great, as we're going to find out in a second. We can see that they've been around a while because they're in the 1910 Tiffany book. And these windows are amazing because most of the time when you get Tiffany in a church in Michigan, it's going to be one or two Tiffany windows and the rest of the collection is a different company. Why? Because Tiffany's wildly expensive. Who can afford to have an entire collection in their church of just Tiffany? Park Congregational Church can afford it. And they use a bunch of 16th, 17th, and 18th century Lutheran paintings as the basis of their art, which to me makes it a little bit less interesting because Tiffany's original art is usually more interesting than when Tiffany Studios attempts to copy classic paintings in this vein. You guys probably know this is Christ praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is the finding at the temple. So images that have been used over and over and over in Protestant churches throughout American history, which makes them, again, just a little bit more interesting than if there's original art. Here's the opposite side. And again, you guys probably recognize, I want to say resurrection here. Christ knocking on the door. That might be the most famous of these images here. This one we're actually going to see again at a different church in just a second here. In addition, just a few close-ups. Again, amazing color palette, amazing representations of the textures of nature, and more close-ups. But what I really want to get to now is another window in their church, and they already have an embarrassment of riches, right? But this is one of their major windows here installed in 1927. This is one that Tiffany repeats in a few other churches over the years. We're going to see another one coming up in Flint in just a little bit here. And these windows are very well marked here at Park Congregational as well. Give you just a little bit of a close-up there. And again, look at those angel wings. They're just phenomenal with a lot of opalescence happening in what we might call the feathers. Here's our cautionary tale, though. If you guys go to church, you got a great window in your church, and somebody in your church is like, hey, let's make an addition and backlight this thing with some artificial light. You be the person on that committee that says, no, Let's never do that, because windows are always better when they're illuminated by sunlight. This is what happens when you're artificially illuminated. Way, way subdued spectrum of color, and doesn't show off the original window's beauty to its fullest potential. So again, we always want windows illuminated by sunlight in any possible case, but if artificial light is the only way to save the window, in that case, it's acceptable. All right, let's now move on to Flint and Saginaw. Is anybody from the Flint or Saginaw area? No, my parents grew up in Flint. They graduated Flint Central and Northwestern High School in the mid-1960s. They didn't go to a fancy church, though. They went to some pretty modest Protestant churches. But anyway, we're going to start off in Saginaw at the First Congregational Church. This is our first design by Gordon W. Lloyd. At least I think it is. I don't think I touched any other Gordon W. Lloyds yet. And this church has only got one Tiffany window, and it is actually a disputed example. We'll get to it in a second. Let's first talk about the life of Gordon W. Lloyd. Born in England in 1832, raised in Canada, went back to England to be trained by his uncle as an architect of Episcopalian churches. That's most of his standing material at this point. The Episcopal Church right at the corner of State and William, for example, is a Gordon W. Lloyd design. And he died in San Francisco in 1904. He went out to San Francisco to take a South Seas cruise, the first cruise he's ever going to take in his life. And he died the day before. Kind of unfortunate, but hopefully he got to see San Francisco first. Hard to say. We don't have the details of that part of the story. But let's look at just a few Gordon W. Lloyd designs. Here we have Forest Hill Cemetery, the offices, sexton's residence, and the main gate here. Our architectural historian in residence, Susan, tells us that all three of the structures are Lloyd designs, although I have run into a few historical debates about the center here. I usually defer to Susan's expertise, though. She wrote the book on Ann Arbor architectural history. In my hometown of Traverse City, this building, when it was originally built, was called the Northern Michigan Asylum for the Insane. Sounds like a scene right out of Mel Brooks' High Anxiety, doesn't it? Well, this building was falling apart when I lived in Traverse City, and now it's completely revamped in some of the coolest Gordon W. Lloyd designs you'll find in the state of Michigan. Also, there are restaurants inside. Yep. Yep. Italian, I think, is the main one that, you can sit at a table that has, I believe this might even be the lights at one of the tables for the restaurant there. So pretty nicely done interior, in my personal opinion. Dowling Hall, one of the original University of Detroit buildings, right in downtown Detroit, also by Lloyd. Schwankowski Temple of Music, one of the oldest steel frame tall buildings on Detroit's commercial stretch, right in the downtown area. But let's get back to First Congregational Church on Jefferson Avenue in Saginaw, built 1868. And here is our Tiffany window that has no Tiffany marker on it. But in my personal opinion, this is what we expect from Tiffany in this era, the expression of nature in different textures and different sizes and shapes of glass. Doesn't make for an incontrovertible argument, but also the opalescence of the clouds and the progressiveness of the cloud formation. You really see some advanced artistry in this window that supports a Tiffany argument. I have two questions. Go ahead. Typically, most common signatures are going to be in the lower right. A lot of times in old windows like this, it can sink into the glass a little bit. And I'm not running out of time, am I?
No, but could you either repeat the question or...
Oh, yes. She was... no sweat. She was asking where you find a maker's mark in windows typically. And typically the most common place is in the lower right corner. Sometimes with old windows, they can recess into the wood frame a little bit. So sometimes you can't see them. We're going to see an example in just a second where you really have to look super closely to find it. But that's just like 75% probably. The other 25% could be anywhere. So you do have to really thoroughly examine a window to make sure it doesn't have a marker's mark. Sometimes you find out later there is one. Like I shoot from far away, for example, a lot of times. Up in the air, stuff that I can't get close to, where I can't identify a maker's mark while I'm photographing it. But then when I get home and I look at the detailed photograph, I'm like, ooh, there it is, right down there in the corner. And I like windows better with marks on them. The older the window is, the more likely it doesn't get a maker's mark. But to me, studying the maker is one of the most exciting parts about stained glass, and that's why I always want a maker's mark if possible. And then also, you don't have to have debates about who actually created it, although sometimes those debates can make the window more interesting. Just a little close-up there. A lot of times in this era... Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot about you, sir.
No, I was going to ask, is that sunflowers resting on a trestle? But now that you've made it close up, it's totally easy to see what it is.
Oh, okay. Good
Thank
deal.
you.
Good deal. So a lot of times in this era, Tiffany would actually get criticized. Like, where's the ecclesiastical symbolism in here? And their office would say, oh, this is the river of life in the Garden of Eden. And that would be the connection that they would try to make. But people wanted the typical Tiffany window look. And, Tiffany's the kind of artist where he's like, if you want to hire me, I'm only going to let you dictate what you get from me so much. You know what I'm saying? The more higher your stature as an artist is, the more you get to use that leverage to actually produce what you want rather than what the congregation is specifically requesting. Let's move on to St. Paul's Episcopal. This is in downtown Flint on Saginaw Street, another Gordon W. Lloyd design, built 1872, 1873. Here is that, I can't remember the scene. This might be Resurrection. I can't remember for sure, but you'll remember we saw this image earlier in the park congregational windows at Grand Rapids, but not quite this brilliant of a primary color palette, which I absolutely love. This is a rare example of a full window. Oh, let's just get a real close look at how beautifully the hair and the skin are rendered. And again, Tiffany did not like having to paint on window, and a lot of times that painted part ends up being the most perfect because he's against doing it and wants it to be perfect for that reason. Go ahead. Yeah, that's a great question because paint does fade over the years, and there's a lot of examples out there of Tiffany windows where the painted section is faded enough that there's been a restoration that's applied, and there can be a wide spectrum from, oh, they did a good job to, oh, they kind of ruined the window. So the technicals of paint, I can't talk about a lot because that's not in my area of expertise, but I can tell you that one of the skills that's important to painting the window is that it's kind of like terracotta. Do you know what terracotta is? Terracotta, after you sculpt it and fire it, its size changes. You have to be very aware of how it's going to expand. Same goes for painting stained glass. It's going to get refired again. It's going to cause some changes to the appearance, and you have to be able to anticipate how the refiring process is going to affect that look. So really super technical stuff, but again, a little bit outside of my expertise. All right, so St. Paul's Episcopal, rare example of a window in a Flint church getting an article in a Detroit newspaper, but that just gives you an idea of the kind of affluence that is involved when it comes to purchasing and getting a Tiffany stained glass window installed. It doesn't always happen, but it's much more common with Tiffany windows than any other maker for it to result in a newspaper article. All right, another Gordon W. Lloyd design, St. John's Episcopal in Saginaw on Michigan Avenue. It gets a little confusing after a while, after all these churches on Saginaw Street in Flint. But anyway, we're back in Saginaw, and here at St. John's Episcopal, we have one for certain Tiffany window. There's another that's disputed. We'll look at it in a second. But look at here how there's kind of like this obscured look here. A lot of times Tiffany would use multiple layers of glass to create an illusion of depth that almost kind of presages like shooting portraits with a wide open aperture, so there's only one element in focus. So that's really interesting, and another thing that makes him very progressive compared to other stained glass makers of the era. Here, oh no, I'm not going to look at that second window that's disputed because I want to talk about Nicola D'Ascenzo. Who knows who D'Ascenzo is? Anybody? Susan, you don't know who D'Ascenzo is? All right, well, this is a treat for you because there's D'Ascenzo stained glass inside the Hatcher Graduate Library that got transplanted from an earlier East Coast building, and one of them even has his signature on it. So when I was looking around St. John's Episcopal here in Saginaw, I found that they had a D'Ascenzo window. It's got a little maker's mark right down here in the corner, and I was elated because D'Ascenzo, he's one of these guys whose skill level is maybe just a micron below Tiffany Tiffany, but he gets no attention in our day and age because Tiffany overshadows everybody. Well, DiCenzo, he made a ton of stained glass, 7,800 windows and 3,900 churches. He was born in Italy in 1871, immigrated to the U.S. in 1882, and when he went back to visit the home country in 1895, 17 years after he immigrated, is it 17? 13 years after he immigrated, they tried to conscript him, and he barely escaped getting conscripted into the Italian army. One of my favorite little stories about him. His studio lasted for a half century, from 1904 to 1954. All right, let's move on now to First Presbyterian on Saginaw Street on Harrison Street in Saginaw. This is a Fred W. Hollister design. He's a local architect, but to me, he's trying to look kind of like what Lloyd is doing, because Lloyd is one of the most well-known church architects in the state of Michigan at this point. Also, we've got kind of a modern addition here that I feel like kind of fights against traditional design, but there's debate as to whether we like that addition or not. Inside, though, it's got some of the best Tiffany windows in the state. Great maker's mark down here in the corners, in the lower right there. But look at the quality of the skin on the face and the quality of the angel wings. Just absolutely stunning piece here and charity here. And these are both part of 3 window installations that have other ornamental Tiffany's on either side that aren't quite as compelling as the full angel. I think that you'd agree. All right, and now moving on to First Presbyterian Church on Saginaw Street in Flint. This is right across from the other one on Saginaw Street in Flint. Interestingly, this guy, Lawrence B. Volk, he's an East Coast architect that did a lot of Catholic church designs, and he's got a design that's in my New Orleans stained glass book. Christ Church, New Orleans, he designed. Really, also their little chapel right next door, both of which have a ton of stained glass inside. Really, really great Tiffany signature example here with the killer piece of opalescent glass that comes from this larger window. They don't know the installation date here, but they know it's before 33 because 33 is when Tiffany Windows goes out of business. So this is in their little, the area outside of the sanctuary, I think maybe called the narthex. So that's in the narthex, and then when we go into the main sanctuary, we get a really huge window with a lot of great primary colors, maybe not as perfect of anatomy as we've seen in some of our prior examples, but still very, very solid. And then, doesn't this look familiar? Seems like we saw something like this just in Grand Rapids, didn't we? We did, except it was a 4-lancet window there. Here we have a 5-lancet with a gate of heaven added to the middle with a bunch of little cherubs that have no bodies and just have little wings by their necks that they fly around with. So totally flawless anatomy here. Why is it maybe a little bit better than the previous window we saw from 1928? Because this is a much older window that was produced probably 1910s, 1920s. And as Tiffany gets closer and closer to 1933 and the going out of business, there are some cost-cutting measures, and sometimes, in my opinion, the anatomy is not as flawless as we see earlier in Tiffany's career. And remember, Tiffany, he's only working on a handful of windows. For the most part, he's a delegator that has a bunch of artists in his studio. But he is the ringleader. He does look over everybody's shoulder, so it's totally appropriate for him to get all the credit. But what's not appropriate is how many individual artists don't actually get credit in the present era. So here's a comparison of Park Congregational versus the Flint Presbyterian example. I was totally fascinated when I found out that there was such a mirror image of each other right here in the state. I'm speculating there's probably a few more that use these angels elsewhere in the United States. All right, and then we get another installation in 1940, Westminster Memorial Studios. Kind of looks like a Tiffany, but obviously not as great as a Tiffany. Why is there a similarity? Because Westminster Memorial Studios employs almost exclusively artists that used to work for Tiffany. They're formed after Tiffany breaks up. All right, who's been to Grosse Ile before? All right, cool. So Grosse Ile, what's that?
Sacred Heart Church.
Sacred
Heart Church in Grosse Ile. St. James.
It's St. James. Which one did you say?
Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart. I didn't know there was a Sacred Heart.
Huge church in Grosse Ile.
Really? Huh. How have I not run across that one? I don't know. I'm going to have to go look for it. Do they have good stained glass?
I've only been to the hall, but the church is huge. The church wasn't open when I went there.
You sure this isn't Grosse Point?
No, it's Grosse Ile near Trenton.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I'm going to look it up. Because I like to think I know all the Catholic churches, and when somebody brings one up that I haven't photographed, I'm like, oh, new prospect. Because the Catholics, they're the best at making stained glass. No offense to any Episcopalians or Presbyterians in the house, but the Catholics are the best at it. So I'm going to be looking into that church. Well, anyway, Grosse Ile, it's a little island in the Detroit River down stream from Detroit, and they have a great all-wood chapel from 1867 designed by Gordon W. Lloyd. And they have a newer church that they actually have their, events inside now, or worship time. But this one's still open, and it's got a beautiful Tiffany window on the inside, installed in 1898, despite the fact that it was made in 1894. Why is that? The first church that Tiffany made it for turned it down, giving St. James an opportunity to get a bargain. And they tell me from their history that they ended up getting a steal on this window compared to what its original price was. All right, let's now move on to the city of Detroit. Where am I at time-wise? Looks like it's 5 to 2. All right, I think we got enough time. We're going to do Detroit and Washtenaw County, and then we'll be done. Let's start off at St. John's Episcopal Church right downtown. If any of you guys aren't familiar with downtown Detroit's geography, here in the background is where, this set of lights is where the Tigers play, and this building's where the Lions play. So we're right in the heart of downtown, right at the corner of Woodward and 75 here. This church actually got moved back about 20 feet from Woodward in the 1930s. They dismantled the entire tower and rebuilt it. So really great story there. They've got a great collection of windows inside that include 3 Tiffany's. The Tiffany's are spectacular too, because I really love these sections up here, the X's that have no art in them, but they really kind of give a feeling of outer space, in my opinion. And I don't know if that was intentional on the part of a Tiffany's artist or not, but they were going for an interesting effect, and they got it. So that's what I really love about it. All of the windows here are signed. Here we see more examples. These are supposed to be rocks, so this gives you an idea of the kind of different textures that Tiffany's trying to develop to emulate and represent nature. Both the organization and chaos of nature. And here is Christ. This one I really like because we can't really tell if Christ is praying in the morning or the evening here. So different ways of interpreting it. I believe that is original Tiffany art, but I'm not sure. It does look like it could be one of those images drawn from 16th, 17th, and 18th century Lutheran German painters. On top of the Tiffany here, we've got some great examples by the Detroit Stained Glass Works, also known as Friedrichsenstaffen. If you guys want to see a Friedrichsenstaffen window locally, go into the First Baptist Church. It has a big rose window that's partially obscured by the organ, but that's a Friedrichsenstaffen example. And they have a spectrum of different styles they execute. That window at First Baptist, it's ornamental and geometric, but they also, as evidenced by these windows, did narrative scenes, and they are the most important company to work out of Detroit making stained glass for most of the 20th century. They last from about the late 1860s to about the 1970s. So really, really gorgeous stuff here. And just a little bit about their history. They went through quite a few corporate name changes, but pretty much Detroit Stained Glass Works and Friedrichsenstaffen, they were kind of interchangeable from the beginning. And if you see the highlight here, this is how I found out about the rose window there at First Baptist Church, which Susan, our top architectural historian here in Detroit, figured out is designed by Elijah E. Myers, the architect of our state capitol, which before Susan figured it out, nobody really knew. So, it wasn't you. It was one of your friends who went to the. Oh, really? All right. Well, thank you for passing on the truth, because I've been telling everybody you figured it out. I'll quit doing that. She's the one who sent me the evidence in an email. So we'll take that. We'll give her that credit. Let's now right down to downtown Detroit. If you ever drive in on 375, this is the church just to your left as you pull into downtown. Christ Church, another Gordon W. Lloyd design, built in 1863. We have St. Elizabeth of Hungary in a garden, and this is maybe the best representation of how Tiffany expresses nature that we'll find in the metro area. We also have another one of my personal favorites, just amazing blues and amazing angel wings in this rendering. And there's also a third window at this church that there is a debate as to whether it's a Tiffany or not. I'm personally not buying it, but some people will tell you there's a third Tiffany window here. It's encased in wood with artificial light, so makes it a little bit less interesting in my personal opinion. All right, and now let's go move to Cass Avenue Methodist Episcopal Church. This is now known as Cass Community Methodist. It's right at the corner of Cass and Selden, right near where the DSO plays at Orchestra Hall. Anybody ever stepped inside this church before? Oh, Susan has. I should have known. Well, this is a real treat if you guys ever get down into the city. They sometimes keep their door open during the day. They do a lot of local charity projects. And when you get inside, you're going to be blown away by the quality of Tiffany windows, purely ornamental, that you're going to find inside. These are installed around 1900, about 10 years after this church is constructed. And these three alone are impressive enough, are they not? The main window is the one that really blows your mind, though. I have prints of this one available for sale today if anybody's interested. So I actually went and saw the DSO perform here at this church a few years ago, and I already knew about the window inside. It's one of the reasons I went. I love the DSO. I love stained glass windows, but one of the biggest treats of that performance was listening to every person who walked in instantly go, "Oh, wow, look at that window." It's like 50 people in a row said the exact same thing, and I really got a kick out of that. Probably the best Tiffany window in the state of Michigan, in my personal opinion. All right, let's now move on to the George L. Beecher residence, 5475 Woodward. This home is now integrated into the Wayne State University campus. It has amazing neoclassical piece at its stair landing, and that automatically makes it wildly interesting because the vast majority of stained glass in stained glass history is religious. When we find a secular example, automatically makes it instantly more interesting than a church installation. It's a tribute to music. We've got lyres here on either side. These little guys here, they have staff and notes in them, even though you can't see it in the detail. And here we have a little cherub who has two flutes being held up by this neoclassical maiden. So really, really amazing piece that if you step into this building, they will let you take a look at. Maybe you have to do a little bit more work to let them take you a photograph on a tripod like I did. Just down the street, just a few blocks away, the David Whitney Jr. residence. This is another beautiful mansion. This is the Whitney restaurant now, if anybody's ever eaten in the Whitney. And it is another Gordon W. Lloyd design, built at the beginning of the 1890s. And not only are the windows beautiful here, all the interior and exterior decor is beautiful here. It's one of the sweetest surviving residences in the metro area. If you ever get a chance, that's wallpaper right there, and it's pretty much three-dimensional. There's texture, very deep texture on it. Here's a little bit of woodwork, ceiling, plaster ceiling, more plaster work on the walls and the rafters. There's a transom window in one of the upstairs room that is said to be a Tiffany. There is a big debate about what is Tiffany here and what is not. Now, me personally, I believe this window is highest on their spectrum of most likely, yes, this is a Tiffany, but they don't have one Tiffany Miker's mark in their entire building. And for as many windows as they have, that's kind of surprising. This frequently gets attributed to Tiffany, and there are many stylistic parts of the window that support that argument, the use of opalescence in most of the glass, but what really doesn't, in my opinion, is the stiffness of the anatomy of the legs. And that doesn't necessarily rule out Tiffany, but to me, it's a portion of the argument that argues against Tiffany. So a lot of people, their attribution for Tiffany at this building is based on the fact that in the newspaper articles when this building was going up, they said, Whitney, he wants Tiffany windows. Hadn't been built yet. Windows hadn't been installed. Well, you know what happens in a lot of those cases when somebody says they want Tiffany windows? They find out how expensive it is, and they change their mind. And they're like, hey, let's get somebody who makes windows like Tiffany, but not Tiffany. So this is, I'm not going to issue a ruling one way or the other. I think this is one of the best debates in the metro area as to whether it's Tiffany or not. But there's other examples inside this building where I think the pendulum swings a little bit more towards it's definitely Tiffany. We'll get to those in just a second. There they are, right there. Okay, this one here on the far left, definitely not Tiffany. This one got busted out by some rocks in the middle 20th century, and they replaced it, and we can clearly see not that impressive compared to the other three. But the other three, they're exactly the kind of subject matter and style of glass rendering that we'd expect. In fact, this is another St. Cecilia right here. Very common figure to be expressed in stained glass. Cherubs with pretty cool wings, and of course, a really great palette of opalescent glass. Let's get just a closer look at them. I also believe these three most likely are Tiffany windows, although it's not proven 100%. All right, last example in Detroit, St. Matthew's and St. Joseph's Episcopal Church at 8850 Woodward. Nettleton and Weaver, not very well-known architects of Detroit's past, but they've got a few standing buildings. This church they did a great job on, though, and it's got 3 Tiffany windows in one of their alcoves. They've been moved from a different spot in the church. Orange, generally not my favorite color when it comes to making stained glass, but in Tiffany's hands, does a pretty good job with it. Pretty jeweled, a little bit three-dimensional. They've got Louis Comfort Tiffany signatures on each pane here, which is always really great. 3 different scenes. I believe that's Mary with a child Christ there. I can't say for sure what's happening. Oh, and Suffer the Little Children, of course. So pretty typical religious themes. And that finishes off Detroit. And now what you guys all came for, what are the Tiffany's right in your area here that you can go see today if you care to? We're going to start off at the Saginaw residence, also known as the Ypsilanti Historical Museum at 220 North Huron. This is a transplanted window. It actually used to stand in the building 2 lots to the south, which we now know as, I want to say the Women's Library buildings. So it got transplanted from the Women's Library building, and it's kind of a contentious transplantation, actually.
There's also a Tiffany, another church in Detroit, Trinity Episcopal.
There is. That church hasn't been used in years, though, and that's why I haven't been able to get inside. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised. Oh, really?
Well, there was a workshop.
How good are they? I do. Oh, you'll be hearing about that because I've been trying to get into that church for years.
There was a stained glass workshop that was led by Art Feminella.
Uh-huh.
That was probably
Okay. So I believe there's probably a decent chance that window's been removed and sold. But that's all speculation because that congregation has been struggling to stay afloat for years, and that can be a huge thing that keeps you afloat for another 5 years if you can find a way to sell your super expensive Tiffany window. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's been removed, but you can be assured I know about that one, and I've been trying to get into that church for years. Many people attribute that church to George D. Mason, who is a very, very important architect of Detroit's past, but people who are really in the know, they get a sense that it's probably designed by Herbert Langford Warren, the former head of architecture at Harvard University, who was a good friend of George Gow Booth. James Edmund Scripps, who pretty much financed that church as a Reformed Episcopal church. But anyway, I don't have any pictures of it, so I'm talking about something that's not even in the lecture. But anyway, this radius window here at the Ypsi Historical Museum, you can see it says Starkweather Library Building. That is same Starkweather that, has their name on the building on Eastern Michigan University campus and the chapel inside Highland Cemetery, which we are going to move on to next. A Mason and Rice design, who we were just talking about, who are the architects of record for Trinity Episcopal in Detroit. This chapel was built in 1889. It's got some really great sandstone embellishments on it that unfortunately have taken on some wear over the years. A great Richardsonian Romanesque look. Inside, we have 3 different Tiffany windows in multiple frames. Those 2 are on opposite sides, and then the adjacent wall, the perpendicular wall, has a 3 radius window installation there that Barry LaRue tells me has recently been revamped and improved, and I haven't been in there since. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what the interior is like here. Am I running out of time there? I'm sorry. I'm going to race through these last few, you guys. First Presbyterian Church in downtown Ypsi. This actually was built as a church with a single tower in 1857. It got remodeled 1898, 1899 by Julius Hess, an important architect of Detroit's past. You can see that it used to have a single tower there, but when they went and remodeled it at the turn of the century, they also put in some new stained glass. These windows, I'm fairly certain are Tiffany's. They definitely have a lot of what we would expect from Tiffany here, but the attribution case is the most solid for the rose window in the balcony. And this one, there's a strong historical case, a lot of written records that back it up. There's no maker's mark on it. But another way that we can confirm it's a Tiffany is by comparing it to another Tiffany window from the exact same era that I photographed at a chapel in New Orleans. And we can see almost stylistic identicality here. We don't have tracery, that's the concrete parts between the panes here, but these Celtic braids, they're absolutely unmistakable, leading me to believe that these windows probably came off the studio floor within a year of each other back in the late 1890s. All right, now let's move on to Ann Arbor. Who is familiar with the First Unitarian Universalist Church right there at the corner of State and Huron? Well, if you ever get a chance, step inside. They've got a beautiful Tiffany window. Also, the architects, Donaldson and Meyer, very important Detroit architects of the era. They designed the University of Michigan Alumni Hall, that's now the Art Museum. And they also designed the St. Thomas School down at the end of State Street, just to name a few. This is much earlier in their career, though, 1882. Richardsonian Romanesque is the style. And inside, we get a beautiful Tiffany window with amazing angel wings here. And if you look real close, remember I was telling you earlier, it sinks into the glass sometimes? But if you look real close, you're just barely going to get it. Tiffany Glass and Decorating Company, New York. So you got to look real. It took me about 3 or 4 minutes of looking at this window before I realized it had recessed into the wood that way. All right, last entry of the day is Newberry Hall at the University of Michigan, designed by Spear and Roans, built in 1891. This is the same architects as the Gandy Dancer and St. Thomas Church, and this is originally built as a university events building of some sort, and eventually becomes the Kelsey Museum of Archaeology. And unfortunately, they have decided that this window is getting stuck in a room that is not part of the public area of the building, which, you know, for at a public university, I feel like it should be in a public part personally. But I called them, I was polite, I asked real nice, they let me in and photograph it. So that is giving the public access to a certain degree, but it would be a lot cooler if this was in a public room, in my personal opinion. A purely ornamental window that's got some great braid work in it, some great jeweled glass, but my favorite part of the window is without a doubt these inscriptions here, because this guy right here, Reverend Charles Fox, he was the first agriculture professor at the University of Michigan, hired in 1953, died about 6 months later. And University of Michigan doesn't even have an agricultural department anymore. But he's still one of the pioneer professors at the U of M. And there's a little stele, steel stele, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but like an obelisk. If you look at the Hatcher Library and you walk around to the left, to the side of the building, you'll find a little memorial there that honors 4 of the first professors in University of Michigan history, and Charles Fox is one of them. So that's one of the many reasons I love this Tiffany window. That concludes my lecture, folks. Thanks for your attention.